Proofs messages go through. Group chats work. The bot ecosystem is mostly intact. Then you try to make a voice or video call on Telegram from RIA and you hit a wall. That wall has a name. It is the Communications, Space and Information Technology Commission, the Saudi regulator that has enforced a blanket restriction on voice-over internet calling since at least 2017. If you live or work in Saudi Arabia, this is the environment you are operating inside. Here is what actually survives and why. I run managed Telegram hosting on dedicated hardware in Singapore. Real Android phones, real Singapore carrier SIMs, sessions that live in Iraq and stay alive month after month. So I watch what happens to people trying to use Telegram from places that filter it, and Saudi Arabia is one of the harder ones. Vision 2030 brought a lot of liberalization talk. The voice-over internet ban was not one of the things that loosened. In early 2025, CITC reaffirmed that voice and video calling over unlicensed apps stays prohibited. This video is for anyone in Riyadh, Jeddah, or Dammam who needs Telegram working for real. Here is the plan. First, what Saudi Arabia actually blocks and what it leaves alone. Then why your VPN keeps dying with the real mechanisms behind it. Then the 3 things that still work, ranked honestly by how long they survive, and why a phone that lives in Singapore is the one that does not get caught. Start with what is really happening on the network. Text messaging on Telegram goes through because cutting it entirely would create political friction with a very large domestic user base. Voice and video are different. They run over a separate path, and that path is cleanly blocked at every major Saudi carrier. Enforcement runs through deep packet inspection appliances and DNS level blocking, coordinated between CITC and the National Cybersecurity Authority. This is not random and it is not occasional. Freedom House rated Saudi Arabia as not free in its 2025 assessment and specifically flagged the voice blocking and the infrastructure behind it. The 3 major carriers, STC, Mobili and Zain, all enforce this at the network level. That is the part people miss. It is not an app store policy you can route around by changing a setting. It is built into the carrier infrastructure itself. CITC also maintains an approved list of licensed voice operators, and those are almost exclusively domestic telco subsidiaries with licensing agreements that funnel revenue back through the regulated tier. Telegram is not on that list. WhatsApp is not on it either. There is no signal that either one is getting added. There is a Telegram specific wrinkle worth understanding. The mtproto protocol that Telegram uses is only partially blocked here. Text travels over a path CITC tolerates. Voice and video use a real-time path over UDP that gets cut at every major Saudi network. Switching to a TCP fallback inside Telegram helps sometimes, briefly in specific spots. It buys you minutes, not weeks. So if your whole need is reading channels and sending text, you may limp along. If you need calls, the protocol itself is working against you here. Now why your VPN keeps dying. The first thing almost everyone tries is a consumer VPN. It works for a few hours, sometimes a few days, then it stops. Saudi networks run deep packet inspection that fingerprints VPN protocols at the transport layer. OpenVPN over UDP or TCP has a distinctive handshake pattern that trained classifiers catch within seconds. WireGuard gets flagged by its packet timing profile rather than any fixed signature. Even protocols designed to look like ordinary web traffic, like V2Ray or Wireless with a WebSocket transport, get caught when their originating addresses show up on CITC threat feeds. This is not me guessing. OANEI probe measurements from inside Saudi Arabia consistently show that commercial VPN endpoints from the major providers get blocked within 24 to 72 hours of the address appearing on shared block lists. The measurement data is public and ongoing. That is the real lifespan of a typical VPN endpoint here. You pay for a year, you get a few days at a time, and then you are back to hunting for a working server while your calls fail. There is another layer on top of that called server name inspection. When your device opens an encrypted connection, it sends the target host name in plain text before the encryption finishes. Saudi networks read that. If the hostname matches a known proxy or VPN domain, the connection gets reset before the handshake even completes. There is a newer standard called Encrypted Client Hello that hides this, and Cloudflare has rolled it out across its network, but enforcement here now includes blocking the address ranges tied to Encrypted Client Hello resolvers as a blunt countermeasure. They cannot read the name, so they block the whole range. So what actually still works? There are three real options, and I want to rank them honestly by how long they survive, not by what is easiest to set up. None of these are magic. The differences between them are exactly the differences that matter when you are the one stuck without calls. Option 1 is mtproto proxies and Telegram's built-in proxy setting. This is the lightest weight choice. Telegram ships with proxy support natively, and the community updates public proxy lists every day. In Saudi Arabia right now, those proxies have a survival rate measured in days. The addresses get reported, OONI confirms the blocking, and the cycle repeats. Text patches through on a fresh proxies. Voice does not, no matter which proxy you use. Minimum setup, fastest failure. It is a stopgap, not a solution. Option 2 is a mobile SOCKS 5 exit in a neutral country. This is a step up. You route your device through a SOCKS 5 proxy that exits from a mobile address in a country that is not on Saudi Arabia's active block list. Survival improves over data center addresses, sometimes weeks instead of days, because mobile carrier ranges are harder to block without hurting legitimate traffic. Before you trust any provider, verify the exit yourself. Run a check from your own machine and look at what comes back. The response should show an address in the country the provider claims, a carrier name that matches a real mobile operator rather than a hosting company, and a network number that belongs to that carrier. The SOCKS 5 hostname scheme forces DNS through the proxy, so nothing leaks around it. If that network number resolves to a data center, the provider is reselling data center addresses under a mobile or residential label. That matters a lot in Saudi Arabia because CITC block lists increasingly target data center networks regardless of the country the address claims to be in. The catch with SOCKS 5 is what you cannot see. You are managing the proxy yourself and you depend on whoever runs the exit. If that operator runs a shared residential pool with dozens of customers cycling through the same address, your Telegram session looks identical to all of theirs. That is exactly the pattern Telegram's own fraud detection watches for. Shared pools hurt session stability in ways that compound over time. You might get weeks of survival against CITC and then lose the account to Telegram itself. Option 3 is the most reliable and the one with the most friction to set up. A full managed cloud phone in Singapore. You are not routing your Saudi device through a proxy at all. You are operating a separate Android phone that lives permanently in Singapore, connects to Telegram from a Singapore carrier SIM, and you reach it from inside Saudi Arabia through a browser session. The Telegram session never touches Saudi infrastructure. There is nothing for CITC to block because the traffic between your browser and that remote phone just looks like ordinary encrypted web traffic. And the phone's traffic toward Telegram looks like a regular Singapore subscriber because that is exactly what it is. Here is why Singapore specifically and not Germany or the United States. Singapore sits in a useful spot relative to Saudi Arabia's filtering. The two countries have substantial commercial ties through energy trade, sovereign investment, and logistics. Singapore hosts banking platforms, logistics hubs, and corporate services that Saudi businesses and government entities depend on every day. Blocking Singtel, M1, or StarHub AnyDress ranges wholesale would create real friction for those entities before any policy announcement. CITC has not done it. That asymmetry is the whole argument. There is a second reason on Telegram's side. Singapore carrier ranges carry a clean reputation with Telegram's own trust systems. They are not associated with the spam campaigns or account farming that have gotten Eastern European data center ranges flagged. A Telegram session that has been alive for 6 months on a Singtel SIM looks like a real Singapore subscriber because it is one. The address does not rotate, that is deliberate. Session health correlates strongly with address stability over time. An address that changes daily looks like a compromised account. An address that has held steady for months looks like a stable subscriber. The honest trade-off is latency. Riyadh to Singapore is roughly 7,000 kilometers. Expect 60 to 90 milliseconds of added round-trip time between your browser in Saudi Arabia and the phone in Singapore. For reading messages, checking groups, and sending text, that is completely unnoticeable. A voice call routed through the cloud phone to a contact in Singapore or Europe feels normal. A call back to someone in Riyadh has that latency baked in since it travels Singapore to Riyadh. That is a real trade-off for voice-heavy use and not much of one for everything else. The setup on your end is minimal. You join the waitlist, the team provisions an Android device on real Singapore carrier hardware, and you connect once through a browser-based session to log in with your own number. You bring the number you already have. No forced swap, no new SIM to acquire. You receive the one-time code on your own device, and we never handle that step. After login, the session persists around the clock on hardware in Singapore. Once your session is on Singapore hardware, harden it. Turn on two-step verification and set a password. That protects the account if SMS delivery is intercepted or if someone gets access to your SIM. Saudi carriers use the same SMS signaling that every carrier uses globally, and the weaknesses in that signaling are well documented. Code interception is not a theoretical attack. Also consider turning off contact sync if you are using Telegram in a professional context. The default uploads your entire contact list to Telegram servers. That is a metadata footprint you may not want, and keeping it off the server is sensible regardless of where you are. Your number's country code matters more than people realize. A Saudi number is fine for personal use and for contacts who already have you saved. If you are setting up a business channel that strangers will message, think about whether that number says more about your location than you intend. Either way, keep the number you have unless there is a specific reason to change it. Swapping numbers mid-session triggers Telegram's fraud detection and can earn you a temporary restriction. If you do need a new one, do the swap from a stable network, not from hotel Wi-Fi in Riyadh that keeps dropping. A few practical numbers. Uptime on the Singapore devices runs above 99% in practice, on power that is backed up so a local outage in Saudi Arabia does not touch the phone. If your internet drops, the phone in Singapore keeps running and your messages keep arriving on it. Nothing queued is lost while you are offline. On payments, Saudi issued Visa and MasterCard process without issue, and Bitcoin and USDT are there for anyone who would rather not have a subscription line on a statement. The entity is Singapore registered and there is no annual lock-in during the pilot. So here is the offer plainly. If you have given up on Telegram voice calls from Riyadh or Jeddah, or you just need a session that stays alive and healthy for business use, that is exactly what I built Telegram Vault for. It is managed Telegram hosting on a real Android phone in Singapore, on a real Singapore carrier SIM, with a dedicated mobile address that does not rotate. You keep your own number. The session lives somewhere CITC cannot reach, on carrier infrastructure Saudi Arabia has every diplomatic reason not to block. Pricing starts at $99 a month for a single account and scales up from there, card or crypto, with concierge onboarding because every device is real hardware rather than a recycled cloud instance. Join the waitlist at telegramvault.org and use code TGYT for a discount on your first month. Verify the exit address yourself with a curl check before you commit. A provider that is doing this honestly will be happy to show you a real Singapore carrier behind it. If this saved you some time, subscribe because the next video goes deeper on how Telegram itself fingerprints your account no matter where you connect from. That is the platform side of the problem, and it is the thing that quietly ends sessions that survived every network block. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.